What just happened in Burkina Faso is not only a national victory, it is proof that the war they are fighting is much deeper than we thought. According to reports from Jibo, the Burkinabé military has just carried out one of the most successful anti-terror operations in recent memory. Over 500 enemy fighters, described as hardened and well-armed, have been neutralized. More than 106 suspects have been captured alive. But here's the real bombshell. Among the arrested are 16 French nationals, 4 Algerians, and 9 others identified as ECOWAS-linked mercenaries. And they weren't just captured with weapons. They were caught with over 800 million CFA francs in cash. Now ask yourself, what are these foreigners doing in Burkina Faso, in the middle of terrorist networks, carrying enough money to fund a militia? The answer is what Captain Ibrahim Traoré has been warning us about for months.
Techniques.
But what is their interest?
It's not really terrorism, it's imperialism. Their goal is to keep us in a state of permanent war, so that we cannot develop and so they can continue to plunder our resources.
This war is not just internal. This is not just a tribal conflict. This is not just some poor villagers picking up arms. This is a well-funded, foreign-backed destabilization effort targeting one of the few African leaders standing up to the old colonial order. For months, Captain Traoré has been raising the alarm. In his interview with RT, he said clearly that there are foreign nationals fighting among the terrorists, embedded in the cells, training, supplying, and giving orders. Some laughed. Some dismissed it as anti-Western propaganda. Well, now the truth is on the ground, in handcuffs, and under military guard. Over a dozen French citizens arrested, foreign mercenaries exposed. This isn't politics anymore, it's evidence. And this evidence vindicates everything Traoré has been saying. Let's be clear, when the Burkinabé military risks their lives to take back territory, they are not just fighting local thugs. They are fighting a hybrid force, part terrorist, part mercenary, part puppet. And those puppets have foreign hands pulling the strings. What kind of game is being played where French nationals are arrested in an active terror zone in West Africa with that kind of cash? Who is paying them? Who sent them? What were they promised? And more importantly, how long has this been going on across Africa without exposure? Because Burkina Faso is not the only country under attack. Mali, Niger, Chad, even Nigeria. All across the Sahel, countries are facing the same pattern. Terrorists appear with weapons that don't come from the market. Groups suddenly have intelligence, mobility, and logistics that match a special forces unit. Then the instability grows, the economy collapses, the government is blamed, and foreign aid agencies arrive, not with real help, but with demands, conditions, and backdoor deals. Traoré saw this for what it was, and instead of begging for help, he started cleaning house. First, he cut off the dependency. Then, he restructured the military. Then, he started arresting arms suppliers. And now, his forces have captured the very proof that this is a war of deception, a war of infiltration, a war where the enemy doesn't wear uniforms but carries diplomatic passports. Now, imagine the courage it takes to move against this, because when you start arresting people with French passports, you are not just making enemies of criminals, you're challenging decades of post-colonial arrangements. But Traoré didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He gave the order, and his men carried it out. And that's what leadership looks like. Now the Burkinabé people are seeing the full picture. Their suffering, their insecurity, their instability. It wasn't just a failure of past governments. It was an orchestrated project, a project funded, organized, and hidden behind a mask of security cooperation. Well, the mask has fallen, and the evidence is in military custody. So where do we go from here? First, we have to understand the level of sacrifice this operation required. Clearing out 500 enemy combatants is not a small task. That means planning, intelligence, discipline, and bravery. It means some of those soldiers likely didn't make it home, but they gave their lives for something bigger than just safety. They gave it for truth, because now the world must face the truth. The media that labeled Traoré as authoritarian will now have to explain why French nationals were in the same camps as terrorists. The so-called human rights groups that accused Burkina Faso of being too aggressive must now account for the 800 million CFA francs recovered. And the international actors who claim to be helping will now have to answer for the silence. This is not just a win on the battlefield. This is a win for narrative, for dignity, for African truth. The story is no longer one of a small West African country fighting terrorists. The story is now about an African country exposing the true machinery of destabilization and refusing to be a pawn. And here's the most powerful part. This victory comes just weeks after Traoré arrested a major arms supplier connected to these same terror groups. That arrest shook the system. It proved that Traoré was going after the people funding the chaos, not just the ones carrying guns. And now, this operation is the confirmation. When you cut off the source, you see the structure collapse. When you chase the money, you expose the network. And when you fight for sovereignty, you uncover the truth. Let's give credit to the Burkinabé armed forces. These are men who are not just following orders. They are reclaiming their homeland. They are not fighting for NATO. They are not fighting for UN medals. They are fighting for their families, their villages, their country's soul. And now, they are making headlines not for defeats, but for discipline and determination. Let's also remember something else. This operation was carried out in Jibo, a region that has suffered immensely from attacks, displacement, and economic strangulation. To liberate Jibo is to liberate the heart of the resistance. It sends a message to every village: help is coming. Truth is rising, traitors are falling, and to those captured mercenaries, your time is up. No longer will you hide in plain sight. No longer will you blend into NGOs, or pose as trainers, or hide behind technical support. Burkina Faso is watching. Africa is watching. And every exposed operative brings us one step closer to total freedom. Now is the time for other African nations to take notes. If Burkina Faso can expose these networks, others can too. If Traoré can arrest arms dealers, others can too. If Burkinabé soldiers can liberate their soil, then what are we waiting for? Let's stop pretending. The war for Africa is not in the future. It's happening now. But this time, the people are winning. This time, the leadership is awake. This time, the narrative is ours. And as more names, more faces, and more documents are revealed, the world will see that what Burkina Faso is doing is not isolation. It is insulation. It is defense. It is rebirth. The continent has been bleeding in silence for too long. Now the silence has been broken. Now the mercenaries are in handcuffs. Now the truth is marching. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, you have been vindicated. The world can no longer deny what you've said. Your people stand with you. Africa salutes you, and history will remember you. Because in a time of deception, you chose revelation. In a time of fear, you chose courage. And in a time of silence, you chose to speak. To the soldiers on the front lines, your sacrifice is not in vain. To the people of Burkina Faso, your pain has not been forgotten. And to the enemies hiding behind contracts and collusion, your day of reckoning has begun. Africa is rising. Truth is rising. And Burkina Faso is leading the way.